Hey everyone, how's it going today and welcome back to another update. So we have a lot of breaking news to share in today's update, especially when it comes to everything revolving around the pandemic, but also about how this is going to tie in with stimulus. Because in today's update, I really want to dedicate half of this update to talking about not just the Omicron right now, because actually one of the many breaking news that we are going to share is that there is actually now officially a brand new variant that has officially just popped up and been announced, otherwise called the IHU variant, that was recently just announced and found in France right now, which is expected or supposedly has about 46 different mutations. Now, because this is still relatively brand new, there are still a lot of things that we are still trying to find information about, but the big idea is that everything from the new variation to, as most of you guys probably already know, is a lot of the brand new cases that are now rising and not necessarily headed in the right direction. What it does mean is that there are things that have to be done, hopefully soon, but we just have to be able to recognize this, especially from a lot of our representatives and our politicians. So in today's update I really just want to talk about everything related to the pandemic. There are new lockdowns that have recently just happened. There are other programs, and then also probably most of all is I want to end this by essentially just talking about how everything that we mention is going to tie into things such as things related to stimulus checks and unemployment and everything related to that, which I think is probably, everything I think is relatively important, because at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is going to potentially not just impact us on the financial level anymore, but even on the health level. And I think that's something that in many cases is probably going to be even more important than everything related to just stimulus when it comes to health, whether this is physical or mental. That is, I think, the most important thing. But it's hopefully going to all make a lot more sense through it. So we're going to get started, but as always, 10 seconds, as always, the same exact drill. Consider smashing the like button if you guys enjoy videos like this. Consider subscribing, hitting the bell. Huge thanks if you guys have been here for a while. Happy New Year. Hopefully it's been going okay so far. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, maybe especially by the very end of this video about what you think about this situation. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So the story to what's happening right now is that they recently just discovered a brand new variant in France called the IHU variant. Now, this variant has technically actually existed, I think, since last year. However, the big thing is that it was something that was very, very subtle, but is now starting to rise again. That's why there are a lot of breaking news articles that are basically coming out right now about this. Now, because it is still relatively brand new, there are still a lot of things that are unknown. Many people believe that maybe the WHO, the WHO, otherwise known as the World Health Organization, might be downplaying it. Other people think that this actually might be a very legitimate thing that they're still keeping just very, very discreet from it. Feel free to share if you guys have any particular opinions or comments or predictions about this, because it shows the ideas is that we're not necessarily headed in the right direction. What they do know is that it's believed by many to potentially be even more contagious than the Omicron situation. Right now, it's not confirmed because they're still doing research, but what we also do know is that supposedly there's also about 46 mutations related to this. And why this is particularly important is because, keep in mind, even though this is something that's not in the US yet, almost everything related to the pandemic started outside of the US, but potentially came to the US. So if we were able to be a lot more cautious or just aware of what was going on outside, maybe we could have been a lot more prepared for everything that has currently been happening pretty much for the last 2 years since this whole thing started. And I've been following this since pretty much it was only in China. So it has been a really, really long time. And I think that's why it's really important to be aware about everything that's been happening. Now, the other big thing that's going on is that we're also starting to now see a lot of lockdowns or pushes to potentially lock down come out again. I know in the US, which is where pretty much most of us are from, we are already starting to see many businesses start to either close down or just hold restrictions, whether it's because the venue, the restaurant, the place, the work area, or just something related to that, someone caught the pandemic. There are many schools that are now starting to go remote again. But what's probably even more severe if you follow news outside is that there's also a lot of countries, especially throughout like Europe, definitely Asia, and probably the most prominent one or the most recent is in Canada, that has now officially started to lock down again. So what this basically means is that in Canada, we are now starting to see things start to close up again, or certainly be impacted. This basically means that many of the things that we typically do, things such as like schools, so for our students, for our kids, gyms, indoor dining, museums, galleries, zoos, historical sites, entertainment, definitely travel, leisure, a lot of this stuff is going to potentially now start to either close down or be limited in capacity once again. And I believe actually in Canada specifically, the day that the lockdown is supposed to start in Ontario, but again, many parts of Canada, is actually today, if you are watching this on release date. So today is actually supposedly the day that they're going to be locking down again for expected at least over the next 3 weeks, which means that they don't expect to be back until at best pretty much around the second half of January. So this is a very, very legit thing that we're starting to see a lot of countries come back again. This is especially particularly true because they also happen to be the country that is actually directly the neighbor of the US, the United States of America, which is where we currently are at. In fact, the fact that they're essentially touching the entire pretty much northern border of the US means that it is something that's pretty important to be relatively alert about at this time. Now, one thing that is very, very interesting is that in Canada, they did recently actually just approve a brand new stimulus check inside of Canada, or stimulus and unemployment, to give a lot of the people there and their own citizens and residents about $300 per week. So what it does mean is that now, if you are in Canada, stimulus/unemployment is now back on the table once again. Now, while I do know is that there's a lot of people that are probably thinking, well, what about in the US? I know I'm in the US. I was also unemployed for most of the beginning. I work in the events and the TV industry outside of this, so you can imagine. But the big idea really is that the fact that we are now starting to see it happen in a lot of other countries, what it does mean is that it's also possible to happen in the US. But at this point, it's really just more about if they actually physically want to do it. That's really probably the most important thing. And while it is true right now, the current story, I think it's important to notice, is that President Biden and a lot of our politicians have announced that they do not plan to go into lockdown at this time. Keep in mind is that if the cases really start to rise, that may not even necessarily be an option anymore. Keep in mind is that for pretty much most of the beginning of the pandemic, we were made a lot of promises about when we would potentially be able to go back to our normal lives again. And in the end, this pandemic, to this day, 2 years later, is still something that's still impacting our daily life, even if it has to be something that's been very, very on and off. So how this really relates to everything is that because right now at this time, there are definitely articles, there are definitely things that are happening that many people believe that there should be a brand new push, that because of the Omicron, or just simply put, pandemic variants of all of the many different variants around, that there should be a new push coming. No, that there is already a new push that currently exists about whether or not this should justify doing more stimulus checks and unemployment programs. And at the end of the day, I think the big thing is that as we're starting to see a lot of businesses either shut down or just simply put, having their businesses, everything related to revenue, just being able to make money, being able to run at full scale, being impacted, what it does mean is that we are not fully back yet. And we are also not necessarily headed, as mentioned, in the right direction. So the belief is that there's definitely enough argument or reason to justify why more stimulus and more unemployment could potentially be needed. And it's because there's a lot of stuff that recently just happened, and probably a lot of stuff that's going to happen going forward from here, because again, they are still doing research that we still don't know to this day, or that we didn't know 1 month ago. So a lot of these changes are potentially going to be impacted, which is pretty much the reason why we hopefully are all here to really be able to follow everything that's happening in our world today. But really beyond this is that that's what I really wanted to share in today's update. So to really just share a lot about what's been happening, not just about financially, of course, definitely that, but even on a health and lifestyle basis, because everything is tied together. And if we're not able to, deal with a lot of this stuff, potentially even more important things are going to be impacted even beyond just financial related stuff. So basically things related to like health and lifestyle. But if you guys found that relatively insightful, maybe consider smashing the like button if you guys haven't done so, or subscribing, but of course you guys can always decide. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, maybe any predictions or opinions about what you think we should do about the current situation. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay well, and I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.